Imagine a time when death walked the streets and the air was filled with the stench of despair. This was the world during the Black Death. This darkness dawned in the 14th century, a sinister shadow creeping from the heart of Asia. It was a time when the world was interconnected through the arteries of trade routes, pulsating with life, and yet unbeknownst to many, it was also the carrier of death. The Black Death, or the bubonic plague as it is scientifically known, hitched a ride on these routes, infiltrating Europe with an insidious stealth. It started subtly: a fever, chills, weakness, symptoms that could be mistaken for a common ailment. But then the true horror would reveal itself. Swellings would appear, blackened and painful, a terrifying testament to the disease's name. This was no ordinary sickness, it was a death sentence. The mortality rate was chillingly high, with estimates suggesting that 2/3 of those infected would succumb to the disease. In this era, medical knowledge was still in its infancy. Doctors were as much in the dark as the victims themselves. They lacked the tools and understanding to combat this unseen enemy. Treatments were rudimentary, often based on superstition rather than science. Some believed the plague was a punishment from God, others blamed the alignment of the planets. Theories abounded, but answers were scarce. The Black Death was not just a health crisis, it was a social catastrophe. It tore apart the fabric of society, causing widespread panic and chaos. Communities were decimated, families torn apart, and the very foundations of medieval Europe were shaken to their core. As the Black Death swept across the continent, it left in its wake a trail of death and destruction. This was a time when survival was not a given, but a blessing. And as we delve deeper into this dark chapter of history, we'll explore the question: could you, with all the advancements of the 21st century, survive the Black Death? Surviving the Black Death was not just a matter of luck, but a battle against fear and ignorance. Imagine a world where the grim specter of death loomed over every aspect of daily life. The Black Death, a merciless pandemic, had taken hold, and the living conditions of the time only served to fan the flames of this catastrophe. Cities were overcrowded, with houses huddled together in narrow streets. Hygiene was a foreign concept. Refuse was casually discarded onto the streets, and open sewers were a common sight. The very air seemed to carry the stench of decay. These unsanitary conditions provided the perfect breeding ground for the fleas carrying the deadly bacterium Yersinia pestis, turning cities into death traps. But the Black Death was more than just a physical ailment. It cast long, chilling shadows over the social and religious fabric of society. As the relentless disease claimed more and more lives, fear bred suspicion, and suspicion gave birth to blame. Certain groups, such as Jews, beggars, and lepers, became scapegoats, accused of poisoning wells and spreading the plague. In the midst of this chaos, attempts were made to contain the spread. Quarantine measures were introduced, although the understanding of disease transmission was rudimentary at best. Plague doctors, in their beaked masks, stuffed with aromatic herbs, became a common sight. These doctors were often not trained physicians, but were hired by towns where the plague had taken hold. Their primary duty was not to cure the sick, but to record in public records the deaths due to the Black Death. Yet despite these measures, the plague raged on, seemingly unstoppable. People lived in constant fear of the memento mori, the reminder of death. The darkness of the Black Death period was so profound that it permeated every aspect of life. In the face of such a merciless enemy, survival seemed like an impossible dream. Living in the shadow of death was a grim reality for those in the throes of the Black Death, a chapter of history that serves as a stark reminder of our own vulnerability. It was in the darkest hour that humanity found its strength. The Black Death, the merciless plague that had swept across continents, began to wane. This decline was not a mere stroke of luck, but rather a testament to human resilience and adaptability. In the midst of despair, society started to understand the importance of sanitation, a concept that was largely foreign before the plague. As people began to link unsanitary conditions with the spread of the disease, cities and towns initiated efforts to clean up. The streets, once littered with waste and filth, slowly transformed into cleaner and more organized environments. Quarantine measures, although rudimentary by today's standards, also played a crucial role in controlling the spread of the disease. The sick were isolated and the healthy kept at a distance. This was a harsh yet necessary measure, one that saved countless lives during this grim period. Simultaneously, the medical world was in a race against time. Healers and doctors of the era, driven by desperation and the urge to save lives, started to develop treatments. They concocted potions and remedies with varying degrees of success. These treatments, although nowhere near as effective as modern medicine, provided a glimmer of hope in a world consumed by fear. The human body too, in its own way, began to fight back. As the disease ravaged populations, survivors started to develop immunity. This immunity was passed down through generations, slowly but surely building a human population less susceptible to the disease. The Black Death was a terrifying chapter in human history, but it also marked a turning point in our understanding of disease and public health. It forced us to take radical steps, to change our ways of life, to adapt and overcome. This defining period in history was a testament to the indomitable spirit of humanity, an affirmation that even in the face of the deadliest of diseases, we are capable of resilience, adaptation, and survival. Fast forward to the present day, would you stand a chance against the Black Death? It's a chilling thought, isn't it, to face a plague that once claimed millions of lives. But before you start drafting your will, let's take a look at how far we've come. In the 14th century, medical science was in its infancy. Remedies were often based on superstition rather than science, and the idea of bacteria causing disease was centuries away. Fast forward to our era, and medical science has made leaps and bounds. We've split the atom, mapped the human genome, and yes, we've learned a great deal about Yersinia pestis, the bacterium responsible for the Black Death. One of our greatest weapons in the fight against the Black Death is antibiotics. Yes, the very same pills you might take for a stubborn sinus infection can also combat the bubonic plague. Antibiotics like streptomycin, gentamicin, and doxycycline are effective at treating the disease, especially if administered early. However, having the right medicine is only half the battle. The importance of early detection cannot be overstressed. The Black Death, like many illnesses, is much easier to treat if caught in the initial stages. Today we have diagnostic tests that can detect the presence of Yersinia pestis in a matter of hours. This is a far cry from the days when diagnosis was based largely on a patient's symptoms and a good deal of guesswork. Furthermore, public health infrastructure plays a crucial role. In the era of the Black Death, cities were crowded and sanitation was poor, creating a perfect breeding ground for disease. Today we understand the importance of sanitation, clean water, and controlling the rat population, which are all critical in preventing the spread of the disease. With the knowledge and resources we have today, surviving the Black Death is possible. But let us not forget the lessons from the past. History has taught us that complacency can be as deadly as any disease. The Black Death may not be a looming threat today, but the lessons it has taught us about public health and disease prevention are just as relevant in the face of modern pandemics. The Black Death was a stark reminder of our vulnerability and the importance of preparedness. It taught us in no uncertain terms the critical role of sanitation, public health measures, and medical research. Back in the 14th century, these concepts were virtually non-existent, leading to the rapid spread of the plague. Fast forward to today, we've made leaps and bounds in these areas, but the lessons of the past are still very much relevant. Recent pandemics have shown us that we can't afford to let our guard down. Just like the Black Death, they've exposed gaps in our health systems and our responses to them. We've seen time and again that diseases do not respect borders or social status. They can strike anyone, anywhere. That's why we must remain vigilant, investing in health infrastructure, research, and global cooperation. While we have come a long way since the Black Death, the battle against disease is far from over, so stay vigilant, stay safe, and remember, history often repeats itself.